Today had been the best part of his life, yet not as a result of the whole drama with his ex-fiancée turned stepmother. Oh well, that joke may have probably contributed to it. He had not been more greatly amused in his life than the last couple of hours he spent with his new family. All through the meal, she had stayed glued to her seat. At a time, he wondered if she was barely breathing, and he had tapped his father to see to his young wife. She seemed to be at a great discomfort. He smiled. That had even worsened the scenario for her. She kept shifting and turning in her seat and barely touched her food. She tried so hard to avoid his gaze, but it was just so impossible, for he was seated right opposite her. That had been the amusement part, but the feeling he had when he met his father for the first time was the best part of his life. A personality that commands respect and awe for a life well spent. He couldn't explain it, but the man seemed so familiar, even though he was sure he had never seen him before. There was just this feeling of familiarity that hung around them, as if they had seen some years back, and this was just a reunion. The warmth of emotion that rushed in his entire being when he held him in his arms was indescribable, and when he had called him son, Francis knew the reason he had never felt delighted about knowing that his father was alive before was because he had never truly known the true happiness of having a father until now. He was taking a walk with his father around the compound of his mansion. He had so many thoughts in his mind, so many questions to ask, but he just couldn't. This moment was the sweetest moment he had ever had with his actual parent, and he just didn't want to ruin it. "Come, son, let's take a seat." They moved to a seat close by. "You remind me so much of my father. Seeing you standing in front of me reminded me of him. You have the same height, which we three share, the tallness, but the way you walk is all him." He was a doctor, too, before he switched to business only. My mother and I never went to the hospital throughout the time he was alive. We had our own private ward in the house. Francis smiled. "I am glad I shared something with grandfather. Tell me how you found out about me, sir." "My late wife did," Frank replied bitterly. "How?" Francis asked. "You see, Franike's investments used to be Nicholas and Greg's investments. Nicholas was my father's name. His partner was Greg, and my late wife was his daughter. Greg got tired of the business and sold his share, and the business became Nicholas Investments. We came to this country many years ago to buy some properties and to find some limestone, some iron and salt, I think. Your mother was one of the women that volunteered to supply water to our workers to drink. She was educated and quite resourceful. She was really beautiful. We had a connection, and a day before I left, we were both sad and drunk, and we made love. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal relationship because she told me she wasn't ready for commitment. This was why I didn't tell her I was engaged. I, however, gave her my mail address at Georgia. That year, I was made the president of board of directors on getting back to Georgia, and I needed to go back to Hungary for a meeting. I guess she wrote couples of letters to tell me about the pregnancy, but the letters got to my fiancé, who read it and hid it from me. After we got married, we couldn't get a child. Then my father died, and my mother was sick, and she refused to be admitted. She kept on asking me to give her a child, a grandchild, but my wife had fibroid, and it affected her womb. We didn't know on time. During her operation 5 years ago, she told me I have a son in Nigeria. You should have seen how mad I was that day. She was weak, so I couldn't really get angry. She wanted to tell me the truth, in case she dies. She told me she had monitored you ever since she got the letter. She had hired some private detectives to track you and your mother down. Your mother died while you were a baby, and your aunt moved you to Lagos State. Do you remember the scholarship you won when you were in college? Francis nodded. It was the scholarship that had made him a doctor today, and he still never knew how he got it. His aunt had said it was his mother taking care of him from the ghost land. That scholarship was from her for you. though it was disguised under another name. Shortly after you got admitted to study medicine at the University of Pretoria, your aunt died and you have been on your own. After you came back to Nigeria, one of the detectives got sick and died, while the other wanted to leave the country with his newly wedded wife. So Rose, my late wife, lost track of you, and she begged for forgiveness, gave me a picture of you when you won the scholarship, and asked me to bring you home. It took me a while before I could forgive her. His tone trailed off as he used a thumb to clean the tears at the corner of his eye. She died before I could forgive her. I became so angry and sad. I opened my 17th company then at South Africa, and then decided to find you. I showed my mother the picture. You should have seen her face. She smiled and called you Nicholas, and then she asked me to bring you home. She died with the picture lying on her chest. She died smiling and satisfied. It took John and his crew about 5 months to find you. I was really hoping you would receive me warmly like you did. I love you, son. You are my blood. All I have is yours. I bought this land for you, everything. I want to die in your arms happily. You are my pride. I have a reason to live now, and you have no idea how much sunshine you have brought into my life. Francis Jr. was touched. He held his father's arm strongly. I love you too, father. I am very proud of you. I mean, who wouldn't? They both chuckled. I want to spend the rest of the little time I have happily with my son and newly wedded chick. He chuckled. Francis Jr. knew this was his chance. By the way, how did you two meet? It was quite funny. She ran into me just as I got down from the plane. She spilled her drink on me, and she was wearing this sexy dress, and the way she was trying to show her sincere apologies, I guess it even got the gas turned on. Francis laughed. Debbie was really the greatest slut. I expected something like that. Attention from ladies. I am, after all, a rich, fine old man, Frank teased. I have a little time to live, son. I just want to be happy without any worries. What do you mean, Dad? I have terminal cancer, son, and it has no cure. This is why I need to be happy with my son and whoever I choose to be my bride. I only had one wife, and she is dead. I had one baby mama, and she is dead too. Trust me, that lady in my house is just for show. She is only here for what she wants from this marriage, and she is not getting it. You are my son, my heir, my joy, and I want to spend the little time I have to be happy with you. Francis Jr. slammed his eyes shut. His father was dying, a father he was just beginning to know. How long do you have? He asked sadly. 4 to 5 months, son. We need to fight it, Dad. No fighting, son. Not anymore. I did that and it gave me that much time. I'll be happy to go like this. I am contented. By the way, I am not dying yet, so snap out of it. We have laws to catch up on. And 5 months is just more than enough. Francis sighed. Let's go back to the house. Help me up, son. Francis held his father steady as he stood up slowly, and they walked together the same way they had come. He was deep in thought as they walked back. He wouldn't tell his father anything about Debbie, and his father seemed to know her for who she really was, as a gold digger and a slut. It would really be amusing to make her feel comfortable while making her feel discomfort at the same time. He could do anything now. After all, this was his father's house. Making her suffer wouldn't chase Debbie away for what she wanted, but it would be amusing to watch for the next 5 months. Debbie chose Rosa from all the maids working in the mansion to be in charge of Francis. Debbie, why would you do something like that to me? Why would you choose me? Rosa demanded angrily. Because, my dear, I can choose you to do anything I want. Remember, you work for me, replied Debbie. Rosa moved closer to her. She was losing her mind. Debbie, I cannot face Francis, please. I can't, I beg of you. Not after everything you did to him. Debbie looked up to her. She seemed surprised and pleased. Oh, You mean after everything we did to him? What? I didn't do anything to him, Rosa retorted. Sure you did. Remember, you were the one who gave me all the information about his dad, so I am as guilty as you are. Rosa couldn't believe her ears. Could this be true? What has she done? By the way, his room is at the west section and your job starts tonight. Off you go. If Rosa hadn't felt a little hatred for Debbie before, she felt it now. Saying nothing, she walked out of the room. She soon found the room. It was easy, as it was the only one at the west wing of the mansion. She deliberated whether to knock or just open the door. She knocked, there was no response. She exhaled, opened the door, stepped in and shut the door behind her. The room was quite big, elegant and luxury. Rosa walked down and spotted a curtain at the right-hand corner of the room. She drew it aside and opened the glassy door. Immediately, she was confronted by a naked man, and she covered her face. What are you doing in my bathroom? She was so embarrassed. I am so sorry. I thought no one was inside, and it was the study room. She ran out of the bathroom back to the bedroom. Great. This had started perfectly. She had run into a naked Francis. Dear God. She was close to losing her mind. Soon, she heard the door open and close. The footsteps got closer and stopped just behind her. She froze, unable to turn around. You are still here, lady. Are you clothed, please? She asked. Why don't you check? It didn't bother you when you barged into me in the bathroom. Why are you so concerned now? She sighed and turned around with a hand over her face. She noticed he was on a bathrobe. She relaxed, unable to meet his gaze. I am really sorry, Francis. I was told it was the study room and that you were not in the room. I didn't mean to. Rosa, is that you? She swallowed and nodded, avoiding his gaze. I could have guessed she would send you. I actually thought you would have left her. I guess your bound is pretty tight. Rosa glanced slightly at him. She had sent you to spy on me, right? Rosa shook her head. The reason she assigned me is best known to her. We both know the truth, Rosa, he replied with a smile. Mischief twinkled in his eyes. She flushed and looked away. Was it that it has been long she saw him, or why was he looking so attractive? It was making her uneasy. If you do not need me, Francis, I will let you be. Or you can ask for someone else. Oh, but I do. Remember, we got along very well, unless I'm making you uncomfortable, which I quite understand. But you can go now. I have no use of you right now. We can start afresh tomorrow. Rosa exhaled. She walked blindly out of the room. Out at last. The next thing to do was to go meet Debbie and give her a piece of her mind. Francis pulled the wooden gate of the garden open and stepped into the garden. He realized that this was how life was supposed to be, with no trouble, no stress, just himself and nature. His life had really changed. Now he had the world at his feet. He was living in a way he had never expected. This place was a whole different atmosphere, a plethora of flora in nature's most simple form. The chirping birds and the beautiful hues of the fish swimming in the big aquarium at the center of the garden. The trees and flowers. His fingers run along the hibiscus flowers, and his eyes were feasted to a treat of colors and sights. He could almost taste the freshness of the morning dew. Nature is beautiful, he said to himself as he walked towards the tall trees, and then he stopped as he caught a movement. Sitting under the baobab tree, close to the lake, was Rosa. She seemed to be lost in whatever she was writing down and typing at the same time. He studied her for a minute as her hair moved softly with the breeze. She was in a white hat which shielded her face from the morning sun, a short blue gown, and a pair of white leather slippers. She was beautiful. Well, guess his life wasn't the only one that had changed around here, he thought, as he moved closer. But then he stepped on a dry stick, which snapped and exposed him. She stood up abruptly. fear in her eyes, her beautiful eyes. He hadn't meant to scare her. What happened to the old funny and sweet Rosa with sweet smiles? This new Rosa was beautiful, jumpy and nervous around him, and he didn't like it. I apologize, Rosa. I didn't mean to scare you. Okay, I am not scared. Do you need me to do anything? She was nervous, very nervous. He wished he could make her relax and smile again. He studied her for a while. Rosa, why are you scared of me? Perhaps he shouldn't have asked that. She looked even worse than she had initially. I am not scared of you, Francis. He sighed, but then noticed how she clutched the books in her hands so tightly. What are you writing on? Nothing, just personal stuff, she retorted, backing away slightly. But I'm sorry, Francis, but I have to go. I have a class. With that, she sped out of his sight, forgetting the laptop on the ground. He shrugged and picked the laptop up. He was about to close the opened laptop, and he saw her sticky notes. Francis, Franiki air, Debbie's loss. Is he stupid not to have said nothing to his father? Out of curiosity, he began to check what she was typing. It doesn't really mean I am his mother, does it? I mean, this whole thing is so twisted. But I'm not his mother. No way. I wasn't even officially married to his father. I am just staying in this house and sleeping with his father, right? It doesn't mean I am Mrs. Debbie Nicholas, even though that is what everyone calls me, right? Oh my God. I'm in a deep shit, Rosa. Rosa, are you even listening to me? Yes, Debbie, I am. If so, what was the last thing I said? Rosa thought for a while. That you are sleeping with your fiancé's father and you are not legally married. Debbie gave an exasperated sigh. You are not helping, Rosa. I need you to think, okay? Think of what I need to do. Rosa was getting tired of all this. Debbie had issues, and she had other pressing issues regarding to the whereabouts of her laptop. It just disappeared, and she had no time to even think about it because Debbie wouldn't even let her think. The lady was driving her nuts. She had to handle this in a more matured way so that she would have time to think about her laptop and where she must have misplaced it. How often have you been avoiding him? Rosa asked. All the time. Maybe you need to stop and confront him. And tell him what exactly? Ask him if he is going to tell his father or not. If he hadn't already told him, plead with him and stop, Rosa. That's a very good idea, but I think you just gave me another clue, she said, wide-eyed. Something told Rosa this wasn't going to be good for her. What is that? She asked Debbie with languid interest. How about if you stay close to him in such a way that you know what he is doing and he can share everything with you? Rosa shook her head. I don't want to understand what you mean, Debbie, but I am not interested. Please think about it, Rosa. You have nothing to lose. He used to like you when he was around, and I knew that. I'm sure he still does. No, I don't bloodily care about that. I am not a puppet. He can be your own puppet that you can manipulate anyhow, but I am not a fool. I refuse to be part of it. Debbie stood her ground. It is either you do that or you leave this place. You have this night to think about it. Please, Rosa, I am dead serious. You may leave now. Rosa stared at Debbie in bewilderment. Did she just get an ultimatum from her? How crazy was this Debbie of a woman anyways? Maybe it's high time she actually left her for good before she ruined her eventually. Well, she would have to find her laptop first before leaving, even though she had no idea where she could go. Few hours later, she was able to sneak into Francis' room. She had remembered it was in the garden she had last used it, and probably Francis may have seen it. She bothered not to put on the light as she prowled around into his study and then around his bed. She couldn't find it. She was going crazy. What if he was with his laptop? And she remembered she usually locked her laptop, but that was just 20 minutes after being used. She tried to calculate the time she had spent talking with him in the morning. It was barely 10 minutes. Panic struck her mind. What if he had seen what was written on her laptop? Oh God! Just then, the light in the bedroom was on, and she remained where she was at a standstill. She knew who it was. She was too scared to look at him. "You know you are pretty to be called a burglar," he said, staring at her. He seemed rather pissed in the tone he has used. With her chest rising and falling, she turned around to face him, unable to look into his face. I am sorry, Francis. I was looking for..." She stopped as she saw the laptop in his other hand. "Oh, I'm sorry, here you go." He handed it to her, and she collected it. She muttered a thanks and was about to leave. "You didn't say anything about writing or knowing how to write." The worst had definitely happened. She had no reason to panic anymore. She just needed to face the music. What a Woman Wants does make an interesting title. However, is it just me, or does the story sound so familiar to me? She knew he was toying with her, but she made no response. "The character Jordan seemed too familiar to me. I could have sworn you were writing about me, except for few lapses though. I mean, he's a soldier in the novel, and he had to travel, leaving his lot of a fiancé at home. And he came back only to realize his fiancé is married to his long-lost father, who is now the general of the country. How so familiar? I am sure you feel the same way because you are the writer, the innocent know-it-all, who can see everything. You are the maid in the house. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I bet Debbie hasn't seen this. Has she?" She gave no reply. "I know if she sees this, she could be very angry with you and wouldn't have brought you into this house. Both of you are just the same." "No, we are not the same," she replied. "Oh, really? Because I can see you do what you think pleases you without bothering who gets hurt or whose story you write in such a despicable manner. You portrayed me as being pathetic, a fool who has no dignity, and who is foolishly in love with that demon of a lady. Do I seem that desperate to you?" He laughed painfully. "You don't know me, Rosa. I can make sure that novel you are writing gets to nowhere. I can sue your entire class for this rubbish. Do I seem pathetic to you still? I am sorry, Francis. Please forgive me. But you were both in a shitty relationship. You allowed yourself to be fooled twice. And what is stopping you from telling your father about the two of you? I really don't understand you. You don't understand me because you don't know me. I don't have a reason to explain myself to you, but seeing how interested you are, I am going to give you a chance. Starting from tomorrow, you will start to know me, and you are going to write that book starting from the beginning, or that book will never see the light of the day. You have this night to think about it. Now you can leave my room." She checked her wristwatch and realized they had been driving for 20 minutes, silently. She had no idea where they were headed. She had only gone to his room earlier to tell him she has finally decided to agree to his suggestion. Why wouldn't she? She had nothing to lose. She had carefully thought about it the previous night and realized she was just given the opportunity to write the best book she had ever written, and she was determined to make it worthwhile. She has always known Debbie to be slutty, ambitious and selfish, determined to get whatever she wanted at any cost, regardless of whoever got burnt as a result of this. It would be a collateral damage. Now she was given the chance to know Francis, to get close to him, to see the reason why he succumbed to be used in this manner. It would go a long way in building her plot, and she could make it as realistic as possible. She was having a great feeling about this, and she knew everything was going to work out as planned. And who knows, perhaps she may become a bestseller or not. Either ways, she could graduate and get published. This morning, she had only told him after cleaning his room, and the next thing he said was to follow him, and they had got into his car and they were still driving. He had said nothing and she had said nothing for the past 20 minutes. She sighed as her phone vibrated for the fourth time, and Luke's face came up on the screen. Yet again, she pressed the red button. "You might want to get that," he spoke, at last, in a husky voice. She was surprised. He finally said something. "It's nothing," she replied with a total lack of interest. "He's been calling you for the 10th time. It's the 4th time, and he..." She frowned, facing him. How did he know he's a he? He shrugged. "Just a hunch." "He will be okay," she replied. She knew she was being cruel to Luke. She hadn't been picking his call for some weeks now, since the day she left him at the cafe. "By the way, where are we going?" she asked, changing the topic. "We are almost there. We have been driving for 20 minutes. Do I seem like a kidnapper?" Francis Nicholas, the billionaire's son, kidnapped a lady does make a great headline, don't you think? She replied. Francis laughed. She hadn't expected him to laugh. She wasn't trying to be funny. "You are crazy, you know. But remember, you work for me now. I can take you anywhere I want to take you, and I don't owe you any explanation for that." His face looked dead serious. She was getting pissed off. "What happened to you? You used to be nicer, a perfect gentleman, and now you are just being mean. You never knew me, Rosa. You are getting to know me. This is the real me, so keep quiet and stop asking questions." She must have slept off the rest of the journey. She had no idea how far they had driven. She woke up after, as the car came to a halt. Rosa looked around. They were parked beside a tree. "We are here," Francis said to her, as he unfastened his seat belt. She did likewise and stepped down from the car. She followed him as he walked down. She noticed some men walking on marbles. One of the men recognized Francis and came closer. They exchanged pleasantries, and Francis walked with him to the tombstone. "Rosa, this is my mother's tomb." She looked surprised. "Your mother is dead?" He nodded. "So many years ago. She died shortly after giving birth to me. I never knew her, but my aunt buried her here, so I bought the land for her last week. I am going to decorate this whole place with flowers to honor her. I will do the same to my aunt's grave. It's a shame they never made it till this moment, when I could have given them the word. I will honor them in death." Rosa had never seen him so sad. He looked just like the old Saint Francis that she knew before he traveled. She had liked that Francis. Perhaps he was still the same. "I am so sorry about your aunt and your mother. I have no idea." His head hung low, and she felt sorry for him. Though she had lost her own parents too, she put a hand on his arms to console him. "I lost my parents at a tender age too, so I understand how you feel." This made him look up. He gave a weak smile. "Thanks, Rosa. I brought you here to tell you where it all started. There is a restaurant somewhere close. I bet you are hungry. Come, let's go." Together, they walked back to the car. Perhaps it was because the windows were tinted was the reason they didn't notice the frenzy caused by the press people waiting expectantly for the son of the billionaire Nicholas. Just as they stopped in front of the restaurant, Francis opened his door. They all rushed him, each trying to ask him questions and trying to get a statement from him. You cannot blame them. Right now, the Nicholas were the people making waves. Francis was really surprised as they all bombarded him with questions. He had barely stepped out of his car. "Was that your mother's tomb? Did she marry Frank Nicholas secretly? Who is this young lady beside you? Is she your girlfriend? If she is your fiancée, why is she dressed like that? Is she your cook or your cleaner?" It was too much for her. For Rosa, she was so scared and so embarrassed. They managed to find their way into the car. He started it and they drove out of the place. "I am so sorry about that," he said after a while. "I never knew they followed us right from the estate. These people are something else. They follow us right from home. My God, I guess I need to be walking about with guards." Rosa made no response. She was still in a bit of shock. She had been really terrified. Francis noticed this and held her hand as he drove. "It's okay, Rosa. I am sorry, I didn't know. She nodded slightly while he concentrated on his driving. He had thought he would take her to the restaurant and they could eat, and he tells her the story the way his father had told him. And since this was ruined, he needed to calm her down. He took another look at her and remembered one of the reporters had asked him if they were engaged and why she was dressed like that. He had actually not taken a good look at her oversized pajamas. That was just distasteful. What happened to that beautiful dress she wore the other day? Why didn't he notice that in the first place? Oh crap! What was he thinking to have dragged her out like that? Now that she will be following her up and down, she will have to be in the limelight with him, not when he was looking so super fly like a superstar and she is looking just that. Why are you dressed like you just woke up from bed? She turned to face him. Oh, you just realized. You want me to take you back to how you ordered me to come with you with no clue of where we were going. You didn't know I just woke up then. If there was anything Frances liked about her, it was her guts. She could say anything she wanted to say to him. She seemed to have forgotten he was the boss. Well, this was not the time for that. She was still angry about the whole frenzy with the pressmen, and one of them had asked if she was a cook, and another had asked if she was the fiancée. By the way, why are you bothered about my dressing? You could have told them I am your cleaner. There is nothing wrong about that, and I am not ashamed of it. That's my work. Francis gave an exasperated sigh, and he brought the car to a halt in the middle of the road. Then he faced her. For this book thing to work, Rosa, you are not going to be my cleaner. I need you to be more than that, he said sternly, and continued, you are going to be my au pair. Think of it like someone that is writing my story and has to be all around me. You will be all up in my business. We go everywhere together. You have spent so many years with Debbie, and you have grown to know her. With this little time, you will get to know me. You will no longer be my cleaner. You are my professional plus one, and you are going to be in the limelight with me. But first, there are some things we need to change about you. He scoffed and turned on the ignition key. Rosa wondered what he just meant by everything he said right now, but she had no clue, and she didn't want to stress herself about it. Check Angela's number for me and dial it, please. Rosa did. The call was answered. Hey you, it's about time you called. Just cause you live in the rich man's world, you've forgotten about your poor folks, right? Said the lady that received the call. Come on, babe. Even if I forget Romeo, you know I can never forget you, Francis replied. I would have killed you before you forget me, Francis. Where you at, babe? I am at my crib. What's up? Remember the stuff we talked about? Meet me at Dolce Vita's shop. The lady screamed. Yeah, you need to spend that money. My hair is on you though. Just come and I will buy you all the hair you need. The lady laughed. Alright, we'll be there. The call ended. Rosa, are you ready? She looked at him. For what? Your life is about to change. She frowned. What do you mean? Just wait and see. He had been waiting at the reception for both ladies to come out for the past 1 hour. He had no idea what could be taking their time. Angela was in the exterior room with Rosa. She had come to meet them some minutes ago, and he had introduced each to the other. Angela had no problem, seeing he had already updated her on what was going on the previous night, and then she had seen the whole press frenzy on the TV, and she totally supported what he was doing. He hoped he wouldn't regret this. They had spent too much on her clothing alone, and now she was in for facials and whatever Angela had called it. She needed to keep up with him. This was the only way this would work. He turned the page of the magazine he was reading and took another nervous look at his wristwatch. He had no idea why he was nervous, but he was. He really wanted to see what difference this would all make. What if she didn't like it? What if she hated makeover? Why had he not even asked her earlier before bringing her here? He couldn't explain it, but he really wanted to impress her and make her happy. Besides, what lady would get such a treat anyways and wouldn't like it? He ran a hand through his curly hair and glanced around. Oh, his mistake. He had come to the wrong place. He just met the gaze of 4 ladies totally checking him out. This was getting out of hand. He needed to leave this place. He dropped the magazine he was holding and was about to stand up when he heard Angela's voice as she came out, prepared to be blown away. The truth was, he had expected her to at least look beautiful and everything that comes with being that. But what he hadn't prepared for was the effect it had on him. Rosa stepped out. Her eyes scanned the room with determination in search of someone, and when her eyes caught his, she smiled and he held his breath. She was wearing a denim ripped jean which clung delightfully to her hips, red turtleneck top, fedora hat was covering a vivacious jetty black hair. Never had he seen black this flawless, alluring. She was glowing, radiating an intelligent beauty. It was like the stars themselves decided to rest behind the soft cushion of her painted lips. He wanted to reach out and touch. He couldn't look away. She kept him so still and held his beating heart. I think it's more appropriate to tell the lady she's beautiful instead of staring at her as if you want to swallow her. He felt completely stupid and embarrassed at Angela's remark. He ran a hand through his head and looked around, surprised to see everyone staring. He noticed Rosa was still smiling, mocking his embarrassment perhaps. "I'm sorry," he said nervously. "You really look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied shyly. Just then, Angela's phone rang, and seeing who the caller was, she frowned. "Crap! Guys, I am so sorry, but I have to run. I promised my sister I will pick my niece up from school. Rosa, don't forget what we discussed." She faced Francis. "Fine boy, we will chat. You children, be good." Rosa smiled as Angela rushed out of the place. "Do you feel hungry?" he asked. "I am starving," she replied. "Everything you bought is in the car, right?" She nodded. "All right, come on. I know the perfect place for a beautiful woman like you." She flushed and smiled as they walked out of the place, ignoring the pair of eyes following them. He liked that. "So you mean those people that came to your house on that day were John and the rest of them?" He nodded. She threw her head back and laughed. She had always thought John reminded her of someone that walked the way he does, and now she just realized it has been him all along. She shook her head. He had just told her everything she had wanted to hear ever since that day at the hospital. He wasn't stupid or naive after all. "But why didn't you say anything even though you knew it had all been a drama?" she asked. "I said nothing because her mother really wanted things to work out. Plus, I knew I would leave her eventually. I knew she could never change and I was just wasting my time." She noticed regret was written all over his face. There was something he wasn't telling her. "You loved her?" she asked quietly, studying him. He was staring at his drink and he nodded slightly. "I did, too much. She was my first and the woman I loved beside my aunt. I met her not long after my aunt died, and I wasted my time with her. I will never love another woman like that again." He was getting emotional. The side of him that she had never seen before. It made him seem so fragile and vulnerable. She felt sorry for him. "Don't look at me like that," he snapped at her angrily. "You are looking at me in a sorry way and I don't like it." "I am sorry. I just got caught up in what you were saying," she replied, slightly embarrassed. "Tell me about you," he demanded. "Nothing much to know about me. I am an orphan, aspiring author who is now working with the long-lost but found son of the billionaire, Franiki. she stated jokingly. He scoffed. Please don't even try that. What I will love to hear is something I don't know about you. Like what? Just then, her phone, which was lying on the table, rang. It was Luke. She sighed and was about to take it, but Francis beat her to it, holding the phone in his hand. Now tell me about your stalker. What, Luke? She laughed. He isn't a stalker. Really? You sure about that? Because he has been calling you all day and you haven't picked it once. She sighed again. I don't want to pick it because I'm feeling guilty for having left him at the cafe and didn't even bother to call him. Francis stared at her. I don't quite follow. She explained her last encounter with Luke on the day Francis had came home. You like him, don't you? He teased, but she gave no reply. She had no idea why she was too shy to discuss Luke with him. I don't want to answer that. Oh, look at you. You are blushing. He teased her further, but she ignored him. I like him, but I don't know. He's just so cute. And I don't know why he even likes me. So you are saying he's cuter than me? She had no idea if to answer that. Is he being serious? He kept staring at her intensely, waiting for her response. She was dumbfounded. Comparing the both of them now, she couldn't tell who was cuter. Why would he even ask her that? Well, she started, but then he burst out laughing, and then she realized he had been toying with her. She exhaled and playfully lifted her cup up, attempting to spill her drink on him. Oh, come on. That's not a good behavior for a pretty lady to behave. Oh, really? So I am pretty now? Of course. I remember the first time I saw you. He burst into laughter. She bit her lips. Oh, look at you. So now that you are now rich and everything, you have forgotten how you looked like. Nothing has really changed about me apart from my clothing and my hair, you know. Your ego too. His brows bustled together. My what? Your ego. You are more pompous now. Have you noticed? He grinned. Yeah, I think you are right. But what do I say? I take after my PA and his phone. She smiled, shaking her head again. I like you, Rosa. She was surprised. She hadn't expected that, but she may have liked the way it sounded. You do? He nodded. Why? He leaned closer. The way he looked at her made her extra conscious of herself. I like your spirit. You are lively and sincere, playful and stubborn too. She laughed. I remember I said something like that before I traveled, and I don't want anything to change about that. I want you to always be yourself with me. You are not Debbie. You don't need to feel guilty because of her. What she did was for her alone, and I don't blame you for anything, okay? She was touched by that, and she nodded. I will not say anything to my father. Faith has been doing her thing, and if she knows what is right, she would know she has to leave. But her greed wouldn't let her be. She would get what she deserves. Rosa had no idea what to say to that. He had made it clear now that he has no plans against Debbie. She could tell Debbie that. But who could she trust between the two of them? Obviously, she was stuck in between the two of them, and she had to decide who she has to trust. Can she trust this man who is looking at her with all sincerity and whose heart Debbie had broken so many times? Or she remains loyal to Debbie and tell her everything they just discussed? Debbie brought her here. If not her, she wouldn't even have known Francis. She looked at him. He was busy typing on his phone and wasn't aware of her staring at him. He was looking so handsome in his white t-shirt. The coils really made him look even more handsome. He was going to help her with her novel, and would she betray him by ranting out his every plan to Debbie? What if he found out Debbie had asked her to stay close to him? He would be so disappointed and so hurt. She couldn't do that to him. She was not Debbie. The way he had grown so emotional some minutes ago made her realize how vulnerable he could be. She studied him, his eyes, his brows, his lips. She knew she liked him. She had always liked him. Spending all this time with him is making her realize she may probably like him even more than she thought. The moment their gaze met at the shop folded back to her. She had never felt so tingling for a man's stare before. She knew she was attracted to her at that moment. It was too obvious, and she had felt it with the way he was staring at her. This was wrong. This game of playing as a middle woman was so wrong.